Welcome back, everyone. On behalf of Forge College, I'm thrilled to kick off this explainer. Today, we're tackling debugging integration failures. If you've been following along with the overarching Solana ecosystem, DeFi, Oracle's AI, and Applied Protocols track, and specifically our capstone, Ecosystem Integrated Solana dApp course, you know we're right in the thick of the developing integration test module. We just wrapped up automating integration tests, and today we get to put on our Web3 detective hats and see what the source material has in store for us. Let's just dive right in.
So, the materials kick things off with this fantastic quote. Automation gives you the symptoms. Diagnosis gives you the cure. It hits the nail right on the head, honestly. In our last lesson, our CI pipeline basically acted as our early warning system, handing us symptoms like failing job artifacts and transaction signatures. But just knowing a crime happened doesn't actually solve it. Now it's time to grab the magnifying glass and find that cure.
To get us there, here is our detective's roadmap for closing the case. We'll start with 1, the crime, flaky tests. Then move on to 2, securing the local lab. 3, immutable evidence. 4, reconstructing timeline. 5, the interrogation. And finally, 6, the fix.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the crime, flaky tests.
So, the first phase of our investigation requires us to analyze the rather slippery nature of our primary suspect, the flaky test. This isn't your standard bug that crashes the system every single time. It's elusive. The materials point out a crucial detail here. Automated retries in your CI pipeline are kind of a double-edged sword. Think of automated retries like a well-meaning but incredibly sloppy beat cop covering up a crime scene. When a test fails intermittently because of a race condition, and hey, if you're new to that term, just think of a race condition like two people trying to grab the exact same slice of pizza at the exact same millisecond, the retry kicks in, the test magically passes on the second try, and your CI turns green. The beat cop just kicks some dirt over the evidence and says, nothing to see here, folks. We actually have to strip away those retries to see the raw, unfettered crime scene.
Moving right along to Section 2, securing the local lab.
Okay, once we acknowledge that the crime scene is a total mess, we need to set up a sterile environment. The materials outline 3 exact procedures to safely mirror the CI job locally, totally free from mainnet interference. Step 1. Start a local solana-test-validator in the background. Step 2. Run npm CI to make sure your project dependencies perfectly match with CI used. And Step 3. Seed a deterministic key pair for your test accounts. If that term is new to you, a deterministic key pair literally just means using a specific mathematical seed so we get the exact same test accounts generated every single time. It basically creates a perfect clean room, which is absolutely mandatory before we even attempt to reproduce the failure.
Next up, Section 3, immutable evidence.
With our lab completely secured, it is time to gather the raw facts using the exact transaction signature flagged by our CI artifact. And it looks like the absolute holy grail of our investigation here is meta.log messages. The source describes this as the CCTV footage of the Solana runtime. It is the immutable, unarguable list of program logs emitted during transaction execution. Because let's face it, the error message in your terminal, that's just hearsay. Meta.log messages is the hard evidence that lets you reconstruct the exact sequence of program calls and account state changes. We use a simple script locally to fetch this trace data directly from the validator.
The guide actually suggests placing a passing trace file and a failing trace file side by side on your screen. What we're doing here is hunting for the exact moment the state diverges. By looking super closely at the logs, you can spot the glitch in the matrix. Does the failing run suddenly throw an unexpected error? Or maybe, is it missing an event assertion that the passing run clearly has? Doing this side-by-side comparison is absolutely critical for the investigation.
Which brings us to Section 4, reconstructing timeline.
Now that we actually have the logs and we've spotted the divergence, we've got to piece together the timeline. We need to know exactly who acted, when they acted, and what the state of the accounts was at that precise millisecond. To help us quickly scan thousands of lines of logs, the material provides this incredibly handy decoder ring for structured logging. When you see a trace prefix appear, that's an informational internal state snapshot. It's really great for checking variable values. An event is a high-level action, like a token transfer. And an error, well, that's your smoking gun, telling you exactly why the transaction aborted. Translating logs into this readable format is honestly a massive time saver.
Let's look at how this builds into a hypothetical timeline. So, at 1 millisecond, a trace snapshot is emitted. Okay, everything's fine. At 12 milliseconds, an event transfer is recorded. Still looking good. But, boom, At 15 milliseconds, an error occurs and execution is completely aborted. By mapping out the timestamps, the log messages, the program IDs, and the relevant account pub keys, we can pinpoint the exact moment our race condition struck. We've officially established the timeline of the crime.
Now for Section 5, the interrogation.
Okay, we have the timeline, and we know exactly how the code failed. But to truly understand a race condition, we have to transition to the simulation phase and essentially make it confess. So, can we force the suspect out of hiding? You know, intermittent bugs love to hide when you're watching them. If the trace suggests a race between two actors, say like two transactions trying to update the exact same account, we need to force those conditions to happen consistently. We've got to put some serious pressure on the code.
Enter our main interrogation technique, the reproducer script. By using a script like scripts/racereproducer.ts, we basically wrap our flaky test in a rapid loop. We send concurrent transactions with controlled ordering and timing directly against our local validator. We are effectively trapping the bug in a small, windowless room, shining a bright light on it, and asking it the exact same question over and over with a really short delay until it finally breaks. Once your reproducer script consistently throws the error, well, you've successfully isolated that timing-sensitive behavior.
And finally, Section 6, the fix. The confession is in. We know exactly why the code is failing. Now it's time to implement the smallest effective fix. Maybe that's a missing account lock or some improper nonce use, and make sure this suspect never walks the streets again. But wait, how do we actually know the fix worked? 50. Yep, running your test loop for 50 iterations under high stress with absolutely zero failures is the gold standard of proof according to our materials. If it fails even once, say on iteration 49, sorry, it's right back to the lab.
Now, once you do hit that perfect 50, you compile the ultimate case file, the debug report. This document is exactly what gets handed over for code review and CI closure. It's got to include concise reproduction steps so anyone else can trigger the bug, a crystal clear explanation of the root cause, your newly patched code, and crucially, a brand new regression test.
The materials really emphasize this next point. The regression test is the literal lock on the jail cell. It encodes the exact failing sequence and asserts the expected post condition. It acts as a permanent safety net, ensuring that no future developer accidentally reintroduces this exact same failure mode. It is the ultimate assurance to your front-end team that the back-end behavior is now rock solid and completely stable.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought for the future. Now that we have locked down our backend, how will these stable, deterministic outcomes shape the responsive dApp UIs we build next? Well, we'll be exploring exactly that in our next lesson, Designing Responsive dApp Interfaces, where we leverage these reliable event orderings to build some truly incredible user experiences. I want to thank you all so much for joining me for this explainer today. Be sure to visit forge.college to dive even deeper into this subject and explore a huge wealth of other amazing Web3 related topics. See you in the next one.